Michael took the stand, and everything changed. With a cold stare at his mother, he declared, "My mom isn't who you think she is." The courtroom went silent as his shocking accusations tore through the air. But just when everyone thought they'd heard it all, Michael dropped a truth that stunned everyone, turning the case upside down. What happened next? You won't believe it, but let's start from the beginning. The courtroom was still thick with tension. Jennifer Thompson, a woman known for her strong public image, sat at the table, her hands folded, her face a mask of calm. For the last 10 years, she had raised her son, Michael, alone after her split with Greg. Their bitter custody battle had dragged on for months, but now it seemed like the final act was about to unfold. 16-year-old Michael was called to the stand. His eyes were cast down as he approached, his steps slow, as if carrying the weight of something far heavier than his years. Everyone in the courtroom had already made their assumptions. They thought he would defend his mother, who had worked tirelessly to raise him in difficult circumstances. After all, she had always been the martyr in this story, the selfless mother who had sacrificed everything for her child. It was a narrative that had taken root in everyone's minds. But when Michael took the stand, the air shifted. His eyes darted from his mother to the jury, filled with a strange blend of fear and something else, something darker, something that made the spectators hold their breath. He steadied himself as if trying to gather courage from somewhere deep inside. The silence was almost unbearable as he looked at the judge, then back at his mother. Then Michael spoke, and the room went cold. "My mom isn't who you think she is," he said, his voice low at first, but growing louder, more intense. The words hung in the air, echoing in the ears of everyone who heard them. Jennifer's face went pale. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. She didn't move. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, unsure if what they were hearing was real or just some figment of adolescent rebellion. But the longer Michael spoke, the more certain it became. His words were a truth that no one had expected. "She lied to all of you. She isn't the saint you believe her to be." Michael's accusations tumbled out one after the other, each one sharper than the last. He wasn't just pointing out flaws, he was unraveling the very image Jennifer had spent years constructing. She was no longer the woman the public saw, selfless, devoted, a mother who fought for her son. The carefully curated version of Jennifer Thompson, that flawless woman who had been put on a pedestal by friends, family, and even the courts, was crashing down piece by piece. Jennifer sat frozen in her chair. Her face betrayed no emotions, but her eyes flickered with panic, as if she could barely comprehend the gravity of what was unfolding. Her mind raced to catch up with the reality of what Michael was saying. How could he? How could her son betray her like this, in front of everyone? The room was tense, as each word from Michael seemed to strip away another layer of the truth. The jury listened intently, each member's expression unreadable. The judge's brow furrowed, but he remained silent, letting the truth unfold. Jennifer had always been the voice of reason, the one who held everything together in the public eye. But now, as her son stood before the court, a clear wedge had formed between them. Michael's voice rang through the room, his accusations painting a picture of a mother who had manipulated, lied, and controlled. It was a side of Jennifer no one had ever seen, and it left everyone in the courtroom reeling. The courtroom was stunned into silence, the weight of the moment almost suffocating. What was happening before their eyes was not just a custody case. It was the unraveling of a life that had been carefully constructed, a life built on secrets and lies, and no one knew where it would end. The room was alive with hushed murmurs as Michael's words filled the space. His voice, once meek and reserved, was now sharp, cutting through the silence with the force of an angry storm. "She told everyone she was a victim, that Dad was the problem," he said. his eyes never leaving his mother. His words struck like a slap, and the courtroom froze in response. Jennifer, who had always portrayed herself as the wronged party, now stood exposed. Michael's voice grew louder, his pain clear in every syllable. "But she's been emotionally manipulating me for years. She forced me to keep secrets, made me hate my father." The words seemed to hang in the air, each one a bombshell that shattered everything Jennifer had worked so hard to maintain. She looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling as they reached for the tissues on the table in front of her. Her face, once full of control and defiance, now betrayed something far more fragile, something that couldn't be hidden anymore. Michael, in his raw honesty, had stripped away the carefully constructed persona that Jennifer had built for years. He was no longer the quiet, obedient son everyone thought they knew. The calm, reserved teenager who never spoke out had been replaced by someone who, for the first time, demanded to be heard. His gaze, intense and filled with both hurt and a trace of defiance, never wavered as it remained fixed on his mother. Jennifer's face reddened, her eyes beginning to well up with tears she couldn't hold back. She wanted to stop him, to plead with him, but she couldn't find the words. The image of the loving, selfless mother she had worked so hard to present to the world was crumbling right before her. It was as though Michael had held up a mirror to her, revealing the truth she had carefully hidden from everyone, including herself. The courtroom was stunned into complete silence. The audience, some still struggling to process the gravity of what they had just heard, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jennifer, the woman who had appeared to have everything under control, was now vulnerable, exposed in a way she had never been before. Some of the spectators looked at Michael with disbelief, while others exchanged glances, trying to make sense of the bombshell revelations. It was a dramatic contrast to the woman they thought they knew. But Michael wasn't finished. His anger, the quiet anger he had hidden for so long, was spilling out now. The years of feeling trapped, manipulated, and lied to had built up, and he wasn't holding back anymore. Jennifer's facade, the perfect image of a mother who had been wronged, was now a distant memory. And Michael was determined to let everyone see the truth, no matter the cost. Jennifer wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. She had always been the one in control, always the one who had all the answers, who was so sure of herself. Now, she was trapped in a moment of vulnerability she couldn't escape from. The weight of Michael's words was crushing, and she could feel every eye in the room on her, watching, waiting. The courtroom's attention was no longer on the custody battle. It was on her, the woman who had claimed the moral high ground for so long, now standing exposed for all to see. The more Michael spoke, the more the audience seemed to understand the depth of his pain. He had always been quiet, the type of person who kept to himself. But now, he was speaking out against the woman who had raised him, against the mother who had manipulated him into silence. His voice, shaking but powerful, was no longer that of a child. It was the voice of someone who had finally been set free, and the truth, once hidden behind years of secrets, was now spilling out for everyone to see. As Michael's words continued to flow, Jennifer felt a wave of revulsion rising within her. Each sentence he spoke felt like a hammer, pounding away at the carefully constructed life she had built. She had done everything in her power to protect him, shielding him from the harsh reality of their broken family, making him believe the lies that justified her decisions. But now, here he was, standing in front of everyone, tearing apart the fabric of their existence. Her heart pounded, but there was no escaping the truth. Her secret life, the one she had kept hidden behind the walls of their home, was unraveling in front of the entire courtroom. Jennifer had always seen herself as the victim, the one who had to endure Greg's neglect and selfishness. She had convinced herself that she had been the one holding everything together, that the sacrifices she made were for Michael's own good. But now, Michael's raw accusations revealed the ugly reality she had tried to suppress, the pain, the manipulation, the lies. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael," Jennifer whispered, her voice strained. She reached out a hand, her trembling fingers hovering in the air between them, as if she could somehow stop the avalanche of truth. Her breath caught in her throat, her mind struggling to find the right words to undo the damage, to protect the image of the loving, self-sacrificing mother she had so carefully portrayed. But her attempt at explanation was met with silence. Michael's face, once filled with trust and love, was now a mask of betrayal and pain. His eyes locked onto hers, and he spoke again, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You've hurt me more than you'll ever know," he said, the words heavy with a mixture of sorrow and anger. His voice shook, not with fear, but with the intensity of everything he had held back for years. Jennifer flinched, the sting of his words landing deep inside her, far more painful than any accusation she had ever thrown at Greg. His words were like knives, each one sinking deeper into her heart as the realization hit her. She had lost him. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with disbelief. The weight of the betrayal was palpable, and the audience seemed paralyzed, unsure of how to respond. They had all assumed Jennifer was the one in the right, the one deserving of sympathy. But now, as they looked at her, this woman who had carefully crafted her image as the devoted mother, something had shifted. The truth was undeniable. She wasn't just a victim. She wasn't the saint she had always made herself out to be. She was the source of the pain Michael had endured. Jennifer's mind raced, but she could no longer make sense of the situation. She had always controlled the narrative, carefully shaping the story of her life, of their life. But now, Michael had taken that control away from her. The man who had once trusted her implicitly was now exposing the darkness that lay beneath the surface. The audience, once sympathetic to her cause, was now watching her crumble, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Michael's voice, though shaky, continued to reverberate in the room, each word making the truth even harder to deny. And in that moment, Jennifer realized that she could no longer hide from the consequences of her actions. She had hurt her son more than she had ever imagined, and the damage was done. There was no going back. The truth was out, and the courtroom was left to grapple with the devastating fallout. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The air felt thick, as if time itself had come to a standstill. Jennifer's eyes widened, her face twisting in disbelief, as Michael, her own son, delivered his final blow. His voice was steady, each word cutting through the silence with surgical precision. "You think you're the victim here? You're not. You're the villain in this story." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Jennifer could only stare in horror. Her mind raced, desperately trying to process what she was hearing. Her son, the child she had raised, the one she had fought so hard to protect, was now calling her the villain. He wasn't just accusing her of mistakes or poor decisions. He was accusing her of being the cause of everything that had gone wrong, of the broken family, of the years of manipulation. His words pierced her deeply, each syllable a strike to her very core. She felt numb, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, unable to stop the tremor that ran through her. Her eyes searched his face, looking for some sign that this was all a mistake, a misunderstanding, but there was nothing. Michael's eyes were cold, filled with a mixture of pain and something darker, a deep, unshakable anger. This was no longer the son she had tried to protect. This was a young man, speaking his truth, regardless of the consequences. The room was silent, the stunned faces of the spectators staring at Michael in disbelief. No one knew how to react. The carefully crafted image of Jennifer, The doting mother, the victim of a cruel ex-husband, was collapsing in real time. The truth was undeniable, and it was clear that Jennifer was no longer the hero of this story. She was the villain. The audience, once sympathetic to her, now saw her through a different lens. The mother they thought they knew was no longer the figure they had idealized. The judge, who had been silent until now, looked between the two of them, his face hardening with the weight of the revelation. He had heard plenty of emotional testimony in his career, but this was different. This was something far more complicated than a simple custody case. This was a moment of reckoning. "This changes everything," he said solemnly, his voice filled with an air of finality. Michael's words echoed in the room, and the gravity of the moment settled over everyone. What was supposed to be a simple, if contentious, custody battle had morphed into something far more explosive. This was no longer just about who would get to raise Michael. This was about a family's unraveling, about painful truths being exposed in the harsh light of the courtroom. No one had expected this, certainly not Jennifer, who had worked so hard to keep control of the narrative. Jennifer's face flushed with a mix of disbelief and shame. Her entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. Lies she had told herself and lies she had told others. But now, Michael had torn it all down in a single moment. The image of the perfect mother, the image she had carefully sculpted, was shattered beyond repair. She was no longer the martyr in this story. She was the one who had caused the damage. As the judge looked down at the paperwork in front of him, the weight of the situation became clear. He couldn't ignore what had just been revealed. The courtroom had witnessed an explosion of emotions that no one could have predicted. The tension in the room was suffocating, but Jennifer's mind was racing, consumed with the truth of what her son had just said. The moment was irreversible. Michael had shattered everything. What was supposed to be a simple custody case had spiraled into a public spectacle. Jennifer could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, some pitying, some judging, but all witnessing her fall from grace. She would never be seen the same way again, and neither would Michael. He had spoken his truth, and in doing so he had rewritten the story.